And this was one of the only collection of chants that Lord Shiva himself approved of. And that's what makes it extremely powerful. In the whole of the Vedas, when Shiva said, okay, you can call upon me using this, Lord Shiva set up his vast tribe, and the tribe was called Rudra. Of the 11 kinds of Rudras, the 11 factions of his tribes, one was called Rudra. Now, if you historically, or if you really look at Vedic literature and you try to go back, you will discover, as I've shared in the past as well, there were the Yakshas, there were the Rakshasas, and there were the Devas. And then there were the Manushyas. Manushyas came a bit later. So Lord Shiva was completely impartial. Lord Vishnu was the cousins of the Devas, and he wanted to support what was going to help humanity or existence forward. But Lord Shiva, on the other hand, said, look, that's not what I want to get into. I don't want to be concerned with presiding or running the show. You tell me whom to slay, I'll do that. Mara काम खत्म किया. दूसरे मुझसे बात करने की आवश्यकता नहीं. But humor aside, the idea of then basically he started people who were outcast started seeking the refuge of Shiva, who did not really care about getting included in the Vedas. And Vedas at that time, or at the time, were the constitution of Bharatvarsha. So being included in the Vedas was akin to being included in the who's who of this country, which means you had won some kind of an Academy Award or Nobel Prize, and you were in there and you were documented, which means you were somebody significant to this country, this nation. Now, Lord Shiva said, that's not important to me. And Indra was very pally with Devrishi Narada. So Narada Muni had a huge role to play in ensuring who gets included in the Vedas. Now, all those people who had been shunned by society saw that here was a Mahatapasvin, a Mahayogi, somebody, a beholder basically of untold power, untold strength, who could move mountains, maybe literally. And that he held so much power, and yet he was completely impartial, unbiased. And he was very easy to please. When you had to go to, for example, Naga Baba, right? My guru. So there were other disciples around who would tell you what you need to take to him. You have to take a special kind of a pan, betel leaf, special kind of a mithai sweets, maybe some money, maybe other things, and that day's newspaper. Because he was in the village, so getting a newspaper was hard there. Similarly, for the Devas, there was quite a bit of criteria what you needed to have in place before you could get an audience with them. Lord Shiva, on the other hand, said, look, if I'm free and if you need me, I'll hear you out. But if I am in my samadhi, if I'm in my solitude, don't even think about it. And he held that throughout, even today, perhaps. Now, all those people who started getting benefit from Lord Shiva started singing his glories. His fame spread far and wide, He said, you don't know Sanskrit? No problem. I'll give you some other kind. Although he was the original creator of all the mantras, an absolute adept at Sanskrit and all the other languages, Prakrit and other that were predominant at the time. He said, but don't worry. If you don't know Sanskrit, doesn't mean you can't attain the highest good that's there in your consciousness. And he started giving people, for example, shower mantras, which disappeared for a while and then were resurrected by Matsendranath and Gorakhnath and that sampradaya, that lineage that came about. So people started singing his glories. Somehow, even though if you read other Vedic meters or chants, some of them are quite complicated. Shri Rudram, on the other hand, is still very straightforward and easy to learn for anybody. I don't think it should take you more than a month to learn. It may take you 6 months or 9 months to perfect the pronunciation of it, and it may take you a lifetime to really feel it, or lifetimes. It doesn't take much long. And this was one of the only collection of chants that Lord Shiva himself approved of. And that's what makes it extremely powerful. In the whole of the Vedas, when Shiva said, okay, you can call upon me using this, it's the only Namakam and Chamakam is the only section of mantras that he approved of, and he agreed with Narada, fine, you can include me. He's always been the shy kind, the recluse kind. Now, when Ved Vyasa, for example, speaks about Bhagavad Gita and he says, Ya swama padmanabhasya mukha padmadi vinisrita. And he says, Gita sugita kritavya kamanna shastra vistra. Why are you going for other scriptures? What's the need when this has been uttered by none other than Lord Vishnu himself, Padmanabh? Similarly, the same applies to those who derive their energy from Shiva, that there is no need to search for a million other mantras when this has been approved by him alone. And like I explained yesterday, the difference between Namakam and Chamakam. So in Namakam, basically, together they constitute what we called Shri Rudram. You have Nama. Nama means to do naman, to offer your obeisance, to do pranam. That's why it's called Namakam. Namash, 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 right? And then you have Chamakam, where there is a desire as well. And Cha is also Sandhi in Sanskrit, which means and, or. So if you are a parent and your child comes to you and says, well, you promised to get me a PlayStation, do you still promise that? And you promised to take me on a vacation, do you still promise that? You promised you will do that for me, does it still hold true? And so on. And you say, okay, yeah. Then the child can hold you to that promise. It's one of the only Phalashrutis. Phalashrutis is the reward of doing anything. Shruti is to hear, actually, Shravan. When we hear a chant or something, it's called the reward of what you're supposed to get from that is called Phalashruti. And chanting of Phalashruti means you're simply hearing the reward. Now, in most places, including Vishnu Sahasranamam, the reward is not promised by the deity himself or herself. But in Namakam and Chamakam, particularly Chamakam in this case, Lord Shiva has affirmed those promises. He says, fine, put them in there. Maybe he was going, maning nahi, let it be. That's why it's called Bholenath. Imagine somebody holding him up to hundreds of promises and him saying, yeah, okay, fine. Lord Vishnu, on the other hand, says, yes, but you have to see your karma. By the way, there is also prarabdha, there is destiny. And do you have enough resources? You see about that too. And I can't say if you have the right mindset or if you're putting in the right effort. So it slips in these caveats that people can't seem to go around. But Bhagwan Shiva's method is straightforward. You do this, you get that. And if somebody comes in between, I'll see to it. And that's why Rudram chant is so powerful. And I speak from my experience. Because as I shared in my memoir, it was the first chant that I actually learned, the first Vedic chant out of Yajurveda that I actually learned. I'll just add, one of the very few chants, hymns, other than Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Durga Saptashati, and Shri Rudram itself, that has been accepted throughout the country. There is no difference between north and south, or east or west. Its dominance, its validity, its acceptance is universal.